Good morning, crime community. I'm here to continue reading Edgar Allan Poe. We're in the notes on English verse. One word here in regard to rhyme, its employment is quite as arbitrary as that of verse is. Our books speak of it as a similarity of sound between the last syllables of different lines, and how absurd such definition in the very teeth of the admitted facts that rhythms are often used in the middle of verses, and they are merely the sound of insufficient to constitute them in perfection. Rhyme may be defined as identity of sound occurring among rhythms between syllables or portions of syllables of equal length at equal intervals and at interspaces, the multiples of these intervals. And iambic, the trochaic, the anapestic, and the didactic are usually admitted divisions of English verse. These varieties in their purity or perfection are to be understood as mere indefinite successions of the feet or pulsations, respectively, from which are derived their names. Our prosodies cite examples of only the most common divisions of the respective rhythms into lines, but profess to cite instances of all the varieties of English verse. These varieties are nevertheless unlimited, but will be readily seen from what has been said. But the books have done much in their dogmas in the way of prohibiting invention. A wild field is opening to the display of novel combinations of meter. The immenseness of the effect derivable from the harmonious combination of various rhythms is a point of strangely neglected or misunderstood. We have in America some few versifiers of fine ear who succeed in admiration of the building of the ordinary established lines, and the iambic parameters of Sprague, for example, surpass even those of Pope, but we have had few evidences of originality in the division of the old rhythms or in the combination of their varieties. In general, the grossest ignorance prevails, even among our finest poets, and even in the respect of the commonplace harmonies upon which they are most habitually employed, if we regard at the same time accuracy of rhythm, melody, and invention, or novel combination of meter, I should have no hesitation in saying that a young and true poetess in Kentucky, Mrs. Amelia Welby, has done more in the way of really good verse than any individual among us. I shall be pardoned, nevertheless, for quoting and commenting upon an excellently well-conceived and well-managed specimen of versification, which will aid in developing some of the propositions already expressed. It is the last leaf of Oliver Wendell Holmes. I saw him once before as he passed by the door, and again the pavement stones resound as he totters o'er the ground with his cane. They say that in his prime, ere the pruning knife of time cut him down, not a better man was found by the crier of his round through the town. But now he walks the streets and he looks at all he meets, so forlorn, and he shakes his feeble head. That is, seems as if he said, they are gone. The mossy marbles rest on the lips that he has pressed on their bloom, and the names he loved to hear have been carved for many a year on the tomb. My grandmamma has said, poor old lady, she is dead long ago, that he has a Roman nose and his cheek is like a rose in the snow, but now this nose is thin and it rests upon his chin like a staff, and a crook is in his back and a melancholy crack in his laugh. I know it is a sin for me to sit and grin at him here, but the old three-quartered hat and the breeches and all that are so queer, and if I should live to be the last leaf upon the tree in the spring, then let them smile and say I do now, and all forsaken bough where I cling. Everyone was acknowledged that this effective harmony of these lines, yet the attempt to scan them by any reference to the rules of the prosodies will be in vain. Indeed, I am at loss to imagine what these books could say upon the subject that would not immediately contradict all that has been said upon them upon others. Let us scan the first stanza. I saw him once before as he passed by the door. And again the pavement stones resound, and he totters o'er the ground with his cane. This is the general scansion of the poem. We have first three iambuses. The second line shifts the rhythm into the trochaic, giving us three trotchkis with the censura equivalent in this case to the trotchki, and the third line of the trotchki and equivalent censura. And it must be observed that although the censura is variable in value and can thus be understood as equivalent to any pulsation which precedes it, it is insufficient in form, and with any singular pulsation, a perfect rhythm. The rhythm is the line, and again is referable, therefore, to the line preceding and depending thereupon. The whole would have been more properly written thus: I saw him once before, as he passed by the door, and again the pavement stones resound, and he totters o'er the ground with his cane. The positive terminating force of the censura is here clearly seen. In the second line, it is just remodeled to make a pause in the trochaical rhythms of means of door. The and again has the air of a resumption, which is in fact it is. The word past in the volume from which we extract the poem, Mr. Griswold's Poets and Poetry of America, has been printed with an allusion, a lesion, past, and thus made one syllable, but improperly, for each syllable requires full accentuation in the form of trotchki. We look at the second stanza, and we shall perceive that in the line, not a better man was found, which according to the construction of the first stanza should be iambical. The author was merely constructed with trotchkis of the preceding verse. The third stanza was constructed as a second, and also the fourth, with a variation in the line, have been carved for many a year, which is thus scanned, have been carved for many a year. Here, in place of the expected trotchki, we have a dactyl. Referring to the prosodies, we learn that by a sincerus, blending of the two short syllables in anapest may sometimes be employed for an iambus, or a dactyl, or a trotchki, all of which is true but excessively unsatisfactory. All rationale of the matter is untouched. I was perhaps wrong in admitting even the truth of the rule. The fact is that in cases such as the summaris of the syllables is erroneously urged, there should be no blending of the two short syllables into one, and unquestionably, if blended, the result would be one long to which they are equivalent. Thus, the blending would be far more producing a trotchki, inasmuch as it would produce more. The idea of a versifier here is to discord the relief of monotone. The time of the pulsation is purposely increased that the ear may not be palled by the too cautionary, by the too continuous harmony. In music, so as in rhythm of words, this principle of discord is one of the most important, and then effectively managed, surprises and delights by its vigorous effect. It seems to be an essential to these variations that they never be of dominion. The decrease in the ordinary time of the pulsation should never be interrupted. A fine discord is often affected by mere change of the order of the syllables without increase. In iambic rhythms, this change is most usually seen. For example, O thou, whatever ere tide please thine ear, Dean draw, plier pick, ear staff of Gulliver, whether thou chose Servan, Tessie, Rearius, air, or laugh and shake in Ra, Bialis, side chair. So the trotchki forms the first foot of the third line. Discords of excess are observed in the concluding foot of the third verse and the pentultimate of the fourth, and the anapest takes place of iambuses. The various discords of we will be understood are efforts for the relief of monotone. Their efforts produce fluctuations in the meter, and are often happen that these fluctuations, if not subsequently counterbalanced, are the affect the ear displeasingly, as do unsolved discords in music. Very generally, one discord requires a counterbalance at no great interval. This is a point, however, which only a very nice ear can appreciate. Pope felt its importance, and more especially Milton. I quote an example from the latter. But say, if our deliverer up to heaven must reascend, what will betide the few? His faithful will among the unfaithful herd, the enemies of truth? Who then shall guide his people who defend? Will they not deal more with his followers than with him they dealt? Be sure the angel will, said the angel, is here used in a single foot and counterbalances in the two previous discords of excess, italicized. This is the practice of Milton, part of Milton, especially alluded when speaking to this poet as surpassing Pope in the adjusting of his harmonies throughout paragraphs of greater lengths than the latter ever ventured to attempt. Discords of excess are also employed, and even more than on a line in the viewing of equalizing the time of the verse with a real time of the preceding one, when the apparent time of this preceding does not exceed the ordinary rhythm. For example, but such a bulk as no 12 bards could raise 12 starveling bards of these degenerate days. As we scan these lines, these first of these lines, we find only the ordinary iambuses, but by the use of the unusual long syllables of verse is made to labor in accordance with the author's favorite whim of making the sound an echo to the sense. It will be found impossible to read aloud, but such a bulk as no 12 bards could raise in the unusual time of 5 iambuses. The drag of the line, therefore, is properly counterbalanced by 2 anapaests in the succeeding, which is thus scanned 12 star veiling bards in these Dagon errate days. From editions of Pope read with allusion thus 12 starveling bards of those degenerate days. But this is, of course, improper. Our books in general are full of false elisions. But to return to our scansion of the last leaf, the 5th and 6th stanzas exactly resemble the second. The 7th differs from all the others. The second line, as well as the first, is iambic. The whole should thus be divided. I know it is a sin for me to sit and grin at him here, but the old 3-cornered hat and the breeches and all that are so queer. In saying that the whole should be thus divided, I mean only to say that this is the true groping of the pulsations and have no reference to the rhymes. I sneak as if these latter had no existence. The last stanza embraces still another variation. It is entirely trochaic and involves the only absolute error to be seen in the whole versification. The rhyme requires that the first syllable of the second line should be long, but there is a monosyllable which can never be forced by any accentuation into length. In truth, from the character of its terminations, most frequently in am, I, o, os, etc., as well as from the paucity of the monosyllabic articles and pronouns so prevalent in the Saxon, the Latin is far as more stagely tongue than our own. It is essentially spondaic. The English is essentially dactylic. The long syllables is the spirit of the Roman and Greek verse. The short syllable is the essence of ours. In casting the eye, for example, over the lines of Silius, we shall not fail to perceive the great preponderance of the spondee. In examining the so-called hexameters by Professor Longfellow, we shall in the same meter see the preponderance of the didactyl. English hexameters are always about 1/3 longer in the eye than Latin or Greek ones, but it follows that what has been here explained from English hexameters are radically different from Latin ones, and it is the predominant foot or pulsation which gives the tone of the verse or establishes its rhythm. Latin hexameters are spondaic rhythms varied by equivalent dactyls. English hexameters are dactylic rhythms varied rarely by equivalent spondees. Not that we cannot have English hexameters in every respect correspondent to the Latin, but that such can be constructed only in a minuteness of labor and with the forced or far-fetched appearance which are at war with the employment to any extent. In building them, we must search for spondaic words, which in English are rare indeed. or in their default, we must construct spondees as long syllables, along with the majority of our monosyllables are short. I quote here an unintentional instance of a perfect English hexameter formed upon the model of the Greek. Man is a complex compound compost, yet he is God-born. This line is thus scanned. Man is a complex compound compost, yet he is God-born. I say that this is a perfect English hexameter formed upon the model of the Greek, because while its rhythm is plainly spondaic, varied by dactyls, and thus is essentially Greek or Latin, he yet preserves as all English verse should preserve, the concordance between the scansion and the reading flow. Such lines, of course, cannot be composed without a degree of difficulty, which must, in effect, their exclusion for all practical purposes from our tongue. Whatever defects may be found in the harmony of our poets, their errors of melody are still more conspicuous. Here the field is comparatively one of little extent. The versifiers, of whom we are all aware of the nature of the rhythms with which he is engaged, can scarcely err in melody unless through careless or affection. The rules of the guidance are simple and few. He should employ his syllables as nearly as possible with the accentuation due in prose reading. His short syllables should never be encumbered with many consonants, and especially never of those difficult of pronunciation. His long syllables should depend as much as possible on full vowels or diphthongal sounds of length. His periods or equivalent pauses should not be so placed as to interrupt a rhythm. Further than this, they need be said. It is therefore justly matter for surprise that when we meet amid the iambics of so fine a versifier as Mr. Bryant, for example, such lines as languished in the damp shade and died afar from men, or still worse as kind influence, lo, their orbs burn them more bright, in the latter of which we can preserve the meter only by drawing out influence into three strongly marked syllables, shortening a long monosyllable, lo, and lengthening the short one, there. In turning over a poem by Alfred B. Street, my attention is arrested by these lines. His sin, O's path, by blazes wound, among trunks grouping in myriads round. Every reader will here perceive the impossibility of pronouncing trunks as a short syllable. The difficulty arises from the number of harsh consonants by which the vowel U is surrounded. There is a rule in Latin prosody that a vowel before two consonants is long. We moderns have not only no such rule, but profess inability to comprehend its rationale. If nevertheless, from the natural limit of man's power of syllabication, a vowel before two consonants is inevitably long, how we shall properly understand as short one, which is embedded among nine. Yet Mr. Street is one of our finest versifiers, and his error is but one of a class in which all his brethren must perniciously indulge, and I must bring this paper to a close. I will not be supposed that any my object has been a treatise upon verse. A word more than I have room to say might be said. I have endeavored to deal with principles while seeming busy with details. A right application of these principles will clear up much obscurity in our common acception of rhythm, and throughout it has been my design not so much thoroughly to investigate the topic of as to dwell upon the salient points of which has been either totally neglected or insufficiently discussed. That is the end of the notes of the English verse, which leads us to the philosophy of composition, which we will leave for another day. I would like to leave off today's lesson by another poem named Emily Bronte of the three Bronte sisters. This is called Anticipation. How beautiful the earth is still, to thee how full of happiness, how little fraught with real ill are unreal phantoms of distress, how spring can bring thee glory yet, and summer win thee to forget December's sullen time. While dost thou hold thy treasure fast, of youth's delight when youth is past, and thou art near thy prime? When those who are thy own compeers, equal in fortune and in years, have seen their morning melt in tears to clouded, smileless day, blessed they had died untried and young, before their hearts went wandering wrong, poor slaves subdued by passion strong, a weak and helpless prey. Because I hoped while they enjoyed, and by fulfillment hope destroyed, as children's hope was trustful breast, I waited bliss and cherished rest. A thoughtful spirit taught me soon that we must long live life be done, and every phase of early joy must always fade and always cloy. This I foresee and would not chase the fleeting treacheries, but with firm foot and tranquil face, held backward from tempering race, gaze over the sands and waves efface to the enduring seas. There cast my number of desire deep in unknown eternity, but never let my spirit tire while looking for what is to be. It is hope's spell that glories like youth to my mature eyes, all nature's millions of mysteries, the fearful and the fair. Hope smooths me in the griefs I know, but lulls my pain with others' woe, and makes me strong to undergo what I am born to bear. Glad comforter, I will not brave, unawed the darkness of the grave. Nay, smile to hear death's billows rave, sustained my guide by thee. The more unjust seems present fate, the more my spirit swells elate, strong in thy strength to anticipate rewarding destiny. That is the today of Ains lessons of prose and prosody. And I hope you like and subscribe, enjoy, and have a wonderful day.